I came to give lots of insights. I'll start with the dessert you'll be served in a few minutes. It's metabolic suicide. Don't do it. But I do enjoy the main course, which was quite maha in nature. You know, the birthplace of hospitals incorporating the new food pyramid, which is back the way it's supposed to be, is here in Florida. I'm going to Tampa tomorrow, and the Tampa Bay General Hospital, Jeff Zakarian, the chef, the Iron Chef, went there and revitalized their food system. We throw about 1/4 of all the food served to hospital patients in the garbage because they won't eat it. And as a doctor, I was warned early on in my career that when you're in the ICU, you can't leave. You got to stay there the whole time, so they bring you food. And the warning was very clear: don't eat the food, you'll get sick. And it was true. Anybody who ate that ICU food that the patients were being forced to eat, they got illnesses and all kinds of, usually runny nose or something, but enough of a warning that you don't want to get into that. But it is a great honor to come to Florida, Orlando, but the entire country, because you're all representing the entire country, and talk to ALEC about some things that I think are really important for you to hear about what our philosophy is in this administration on some of the realities of taking care of our fellow man. There's a beautiful inscription as you walk into our building, the Health and Human Services building, where Secretary Kennedy and myself and others spend most of our time, and it was from Hubert Humphrey. And he wrote in the 70s that it is the moral test of government to take care of those at the dawn of life, our children, those at the twilight of life, our seniors, and those living in the shadows. Think of that haunting use of light as a metaphor. What he was really getting at, and what I think all of us feel deep in our hearts, it was the founding fathers of this nation had some of these philosophies. There were quite a few doctors involved in that enterprise, that we will take care of our most vulnerable. All great people do, and we're a great nation, so we're going to do that. Some of the difficult decisions that we have to make are similar, analogous to the ones that as a heart surgeon I had to make. It's not nice to tell people news they don't want to hear. It's not polite to say things that might mean their life's in jeopardy or they've got to take massive transformational steps. And although they may not like you afterwards, they will respect you if you tell them the truth. And because of that, one day, they might actually love you for having done something that was brave and necessary. And I think of that quite a bit because the job in Washington is actually quite similar to being in the open heart surgical suite. The only difference is that Washington is bloodier. And at least in the OR, we use anesthesia. And that is the fundamental reality of why we have slipped and fallen on some of these fundamental needs. And I think we can course correct if we do it together. But it's an all of government affair. And when the president in the State of the Union address in February anointed the vice president to run the anti-fraud task force, the reason he did it was to have everybody work together. So if I have something that I observe in claims and bills and the record of your care, I can actually call Scott Bessent at Treasury and have him do forensic accounting to find out where's the money being siphoned off to. Or I can call DOJ or Todd Blanchett, the DOJ, or Kash Patella, FBI, and take action against some of these folks. But you know who else we can call? The states, our biggest partners on Medicaid. We can call governors and legislators and get collaboration, and that's how we're going to get ahead of this, because we have to be aligned in order to succeed. And some of the things we've done in the last year and a half are designed for that very purpose, to get us to align. And that's one of the reasons that I'm optimistic about where we are right now and where we're headed. So there's a couple topics that I want to discuss today. I'm going to set it out. I was on the faculty of a university before I came into office, so I'm used to teaching people, but especially when you have really good students, as you all are, the things that I'm saying I really feel are important for you to understand, commit to heart, and take back as evidence that there's stuff happening in DC that makes sense, but also because much of it I can't do without you. None of us can. So here are the 4 categories, and this is the path to prosperity, I believe. This is how we'll fix these beautiful safety net systems that were designed with the thoughts that Hubert Humphrey put in that beautiful quote that all of us know deep in our hearts are important to us as Americans. Issue number 1, we do have to crush fraud, waste, and abuse because it speaks to a deeper corruption in the system. Issue number 2, we have to be able to transform healthcare in rural parts of this country where 60 million people are trapped with care that is inferior to that offered in urban parts of the country. A life expectancy that's almost a decade shorter in some areas. Your zip code should not be your destiny. We have a major initiative, as you know, to address that. I want to walk you through it, make sure you get the money that's due you to do the things you should do with it. Number three, we're going to preserve Medicaid. This is going to be a big campaign issue. It might be the biggest that the two parties are using on each other, and I'm not even going to take a position on that. I'm just going to explain what we did, and you judge if you think it was the right thing to do, and you decide how you want to talk about it. And the fourth is technology, and this is an all-of-America issue. What are we going to do with AI in healthcare? Big decisions. Most of the public is scared about these, for good reason, issues, but most Americans, if they understand these topics, start to begin to engage in them. And we fear most what we don't understand, which is why this is all critical. Now, that stated, I'm going to make two really important points to start with. Before I came into government, I had never served in government. And my main exposure to government service was people at the DMV. And you remember the movie Zootopia with the sloth at the DMV? That was a fairly close approximation of what I expected. It was the biggest error I had coming into government. I didn't realize how committed these civil servants were. Now, maybe CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, maybe it's different, but I actually think it's probably the truth around the government. But people who work in my agency, they could earn twice as much money on the outside. They gave up better paying jobs because they felt they were given a gift by God that they could give to the American people. And you know what upsets them? Not being allowed to do their jobs. That really gets them upset. When they were told they couldn't go after fraud, waste, and abuse because it would make the system look bad, they didn't like that because they knew what was really happening, and it bothered them enough that when I came in, it was an open secret that they wanted to take actions on these issues. All I had to do was listen to highly qualified people. When I walk down the hallways of our agency and see the thousands of bright-eyed, cheery individuals, because they pretty are in a good place now, I see that kind of enthusiasm. The second big point I want to leave you with. Yes, money matters, and we spend $2 trillion of it in my agency, which is the largest financial spender in the country. We spend almost twice as much as the Defense Department. But that's not where the real secret is. If we can get Americans to be healthy enough that they'll work just one more year, so vigorous, so with it, so much gusto, that they want to take one more year of their life and dedicate it to work. It might be that they retire at 63, not the average age of 62. But it might be they're healthy enough that they can work throughout their work life and not have to take time off for illness, or they engage the workforce earlier. Any way you do it, one extra year of work in our nation by the working class people of this country every year would generate $1 trillion to the GDP. With a T, $1 trillion. That deals with our gap and the debt. It helps with the deficit on social spending that generates $300 billion of taxes. So we're fighting for something really big, and it's driven by quality. The most expensive thing we do in medicine is deliver poor quality care, because you're paying someone who's incompetent to do a bad job, then you're paying and they charge you more than they deserve. Then you're charged by a competent person to fix the problem, if you can. Then you have to pay for all the downstream complications because you missed the boat in the first place. And these are the kinds of things that we cannot tolerate anymore in our great nation. That's why we're going after them. All right, let's start with fraud. The first of the four topics we're going to cover. And I want to thank you very much, because you guys have been all over this issue. Without state legislators often being ahead of us, we wouldn't have a light out there to follow. You have allowed us to develop concepts that you first took the opportunity to enact in your own states. And I will treasure my ability to speak with you, if nothing else, just to thank you for doing that. And please give yourselves an applause, because you deserve it. Let's talk a little bit about why fraud is such a problem. And I actually think we ought to just call it corruption, because fraud is about a rotting of the fundamental high-trust society that we were born into. Just over the last decade, there's been a 10-point drop in the confidence Americans have about the goodness of their neighbors. We're becoming a lonely society because we're evolving into a low-trust society. This, by the way, very fixable. But if you have a high-trust society, no one steals from the poor. You just don't do that. You guys had a beautiful prayer before this session opened. Within those words is that basic assumption that you don't hurt people when they're down. You do the opposite. Yet we are witnessing in many parts of the country, many cases, foreign multinational criminal organizations. These aren't fly-by-night guys. They're weaponized individuals taking advantage of the system. And a lot of this happened because of COVID. Because in COVID, we got sloppy. We took the guardrails down. It was a crisis. Everyone said, just get the support out there. And they began throwing money at problems, which taught criminals they could defraud the U.S. healthcare system. 1/2 of all federal fraud, stolen money, is in healthcare. Again, we're the largest target, but there's a lot of ways to steal from us. Just the Medicare beneficiary numbers alone, those ID numbers that you get when you reach retirement age, we probably have 3 to 4 million of those that have been stolen. There's 70 million people on Medicare rather, 80 million on Medicaid. There are a lot of numbers out there that bad guys can get their hands on. But we have a new era of scrutiny, a new opportunity. I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of what's happening now and then our strategy to fix it. Let's take the beautiful program of hospice, created 40 years ago to help people leave their life with dignity. And it wasn't a problem. Everyone understood the rules. You go on hospice, you give up your Medicare, we help you with the needs that you have, and off you go. There are almost 6,000 hospices in America. 1/3 of all hospices in the United States are in one city. Not state, one city, Los Angeles. There are not that many people dying there. Impossible. Yet for years, although their own auditors were warning about this, everyone did performative things, but they didn't take the problem on because it's awkward to challenge fraud at that scale. So we have now shut down more than half of all the hospices in Los Angeles. And here's the part you're gonna love. I'm not hearing a lot of belly aching. I'm getting a lot of AI-generated notices with some papers attached saying, you know, we got it wrong. I mean, there are a couple cases, of course, when the people who made, for whatever reason, some decisions made them look bad, but they weren't actually devilishly trying to take advantage of people who were dying. And so we let them back on again. But the vast majority of folks in this gauntlet that we put them through, the net that we cast, were guilty and they just ran. It's called the Hawthorne effect. When you send a letter to someone telling them that you're watching, they stop doing the bad things. Let's talk about skin substitutes. Little postage stamp sizes of skin, the size of my nail, that 5 years ago was about a $100 million business in America. Again, they're small little things. They cost $35 in Europe, but not in America, because in America you could charge $5,000 and then pay a kickback to the doctor, and you could generate hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, last year, we paid $14.4 billion for skin substitutes. It was going to be over $25 billion this year. That is a massive amount of fraud. So we did what anyone who's capable and competent does. We changed the rules. We said, from now on, you can't do that anymore. We just said, you got to charge what everyone else should charge, which is $125. When you didn't have the money to bribe the doctors and nurses and the home health care system, guess what happened? The business went down. How much? 99%. That's a lot of money just by making it obvious we're watching. You heard on Tuesday, Secretary Kennedy and I and the White House Task Force deferred another $1 billion from California and Minnesota. Minnesota and California are two states where we've had a lot of issues just trying to get feedback on whether or not the bills that are being submitted to us make sense. But there's a bigger problem when we have states that don't collaborate. Because when they do collaborate, it's a whole different ballgame. This state we came after because the number of durable medical equipment suppliers in South Florida that ship wheelchairs and catheters, it's twice the number of McDonald's. I mean, how many McDonald's are there? I think they're a fair number, but twice that many in South Florida. And it turns out it's because the Cuban government, we believe, is involved. Folks come over, they start these businesses, they fake bill, they collect a couple $1,000,000, they flee back. And they were getting away with this. The governor here, when we reached out and said, hey, we're upset about this, he doubled down and said, we're gonna fix it. And he asked for a moratorium on Medicaid paying durable medical equipments. We did it nationwide for Medicare. That works. That's a collaboration, that's a partnership. But when we don't have that partnership, it creates some bigger problems. So I'm gonna ask you, is fraud a flaw? Is it bad for your state to have fraud? How many think that's true? Put your hands up. Is fraud bad? All right, let me try to talk you out of that naive belief. Because I think part of our problem is that fraud is a feature in a lot of states. Let's go to New York. New York, #1 job in the entire state of New York by a factor of 2 is a personal care service attendant. Someone, your kid, is carrying groceries upstairs for you, driving you to a doctor's office. In theory, if you're incapacitated, that might be a good investment of federal dollars. But 500,000 people are now hired to do that. So think about this. 500,000 people who would have been unemployed usually, and therefore getting unemployment benefits, instead are getting Medicaid payments that the federal government reinforces. So that's why in New York it's called medicating it. That's the word, medicating it. And that verb is unfortunately demonstrative of what the real goal is. So now we've got all these people are on the program that Medicaid federal government is reimbursing for, but here's the part that's going to upset you. And this is happening in California as well, and other states I'm concerned about. They gave the information of these people who have become personal care service workers to the unions. And they turned the unions loose on them. And you cannot get out of the union's desire to sign you up. In California, I spoke to several people who had this happen to them. They locked the door. You can't leave the room till you sign up, they allege. And then when you sign up, no one answers when you try to get off the union payroll or the membership. And then all those dues are directly funneled into the union, which then uses it to fund their political action committees and its political patronage. Now, the DOJ is going after the fiscal intermediary this month in New York. We're going to go after this issue, but I want to highlight to you, don't naively think fraud is always a bad thing. Not everyone feels the same way you do, and that's one of the reasons I think we're going to be successful, because the American people don't like that. And this is not a partisan issue. Nobody likes that. People on both sides of the aisle say, guys, maybe I want to support more than you want to support, but none of us want our money stolen. So it's a theme that's going to resonate and can continue to come up again and again as we clean this system up, which we are doing. I'll give you some numbers to give you optimism. We spend $100 billion a year on fraud, waste, and abuse just in my agency. This past year, we stopped $42 billion from leaving the building. The way you stop fraud is not paying and chasing. It's the money never goes out. When the money never leaves you, they never get their hands on it, and they go and defraud somebody else. These are not going away. These people came to us from crypto and a bunch of industries, fake advertisements, et cetera. They flow to us. Now they're going to go to somebody else, but we have to stop the money from leaving. And when we do it wisely and thoughtfully, and we get states supportive of it and doing what they need to do because they know their issues better than anyone else does, with your leadership, we will suffocate this problem. And we're seeing it happen in many, many different areas. We're revalidating providers to make sure they're legitimate. In Minnesota, when we asked them to revalidate the providers in higher risk areas, half the people didn't pass. That means that half the people that we were paying money to didn't have the right to be doing the services that we're being charged for. This is low-lying fruit. These are opportunities that we have to dramatically make an impact. Okay, so that's fraud. Number 2 issue, rural health care. What is happening in rural America and how are we going to take this on? Part of the challenge in rural America is that the scale of health care in urban areas is much grander. So you can do group purchasing arrangements. You can have the highest and best technologies for capturing codes and electronic medical records. You have higher quality specialists who maybe aren't going to go out to the rural areas. And so what we try to do with the Rural Health Transformation Fund, which is part of the Working Families Tax Cut legislation last July 4th when the president signed it, Part of the goal was to put $50 billion into your pockets. Now, they gave me the money on July 5th, and I was very strictly told to get it out of Washington by the end of the year. And on December 29th, because they don't want some bureaucrat in DC holding up the money, by December 29th, the money was sent to all your states, every single one. Now, the 50 states, now the governors have the money. Their job is to start spending that money based on the applications they gave to us, the things they promised that they would do. That money needs to start going out now, and it should be deployed by October. Now, I'm going to point something out to you. The way the law was written, I look at the grants, gave the money out, $50 billion over 5 years is to every single state, $200 million for 5 years in a row. One more time. This year and for the next 5 years, you will all get roughly $200 million to spend on improving rural health care. If you do not spend it well, I'm obliged to take it back and give it to the other states who are spending it well. So use your money wisely. What do you want to do with it? There's lots of things, but I would encourage you to think about the premise I gave you earlier, which is we have a major life expectancy difference. Can we bring up rural health care? How do we do it? Make the big institutions, the ones that have lots more money, lots more connections, they have all the lobbyists, have them start to share their resources with the smaller facilities. Not their money. You don't need their money. We're giving you money. Use the money we're giving to upgrade the smaller hospitals and clinics and rural healthcare centers and facilities that provide the foundational care of health in rural America. Give it to them and let them copy the bigger institutions. Have the bigger ones share their group purchasing. Have them share their medical record systems, their IT systems. Their specialists can do grand rounds together with the specialists at the smaller facility. They can form more of a communion. We can even help them make that easier by funding the necessary resources. These kinds of investments make a big difference. Many states are taking this money, and they would get extra money if they did this, just to make sure we have a presidential fitness test again. Secretary Kennedy's uncle, John F. Kennedy, and his predecessor, Eisenhower, created this beautiful test. How many of you remember climbing the rope to the top of the gym? I thought I was going to die. In my school, they had just a black bag to catch it. It was like a body bag. They put a body bag down under the rope. We probably can't do that anymore. But there are other things we can do, like sit-ups and push-ups. And we are paying $100 million to the states who are using the physical fitness test of the president, the one that was created 65 years ago, to help kids get back in shape. The Rural Health Transformation Fund is flowing. And I've been all over the country. I travel a lot because everyone's got health issues. But I was in Iowa recently. In Iowa, they're using the money as a hub and spoke. They're using tools like telemedicine to get the Autism Center at the University of Iowa, which is the main academic center, to help smaller clinics taking care with challenges from learning disabilities. In Ohio, Governor DeWine started something called Ohio C. They go to all the elementary schools and they test the vision of all the kids in rural parts of the state who often don't get tested. And the kids aren't learning because they can't see the board. And so now we fund that. It's not a lot of money. Again, you have $200 million a year for 5 years. We can right-size the system if we do it the right way. Montana is modernizing its EHR, electronic health record system, so everyone gets access to their information so you can use that information more wisely. Louisiana is renting phones, inexpensive cell phones, to people in need in rural parts of the state so they can use apps and be able to communicate with the ecosystems. They can ask questions, curbside consults, so to speak, of clinicians. These are all parts of a larger quilt, and I'll tell you why America loves the idea. Because Americana, our vision for what the foundations of our nation and its values are, is based in rural America. That's the beginning of the culture. So when we see that and we see those areas falling behind and we know we can fix it, it's a moral obligation, a test to make sure that we do that the right way, which is why Congress voted and put this money out. Again, it's the largest investment ever in rural America. It's a 50% increase over what historically had been spent in rural America by Medicaid. Third thing, that's the second one, rural America. So we got fraud, rural America. Third thing is about Medicaid work requirements. This is a big topic. Let me take a step back and explain what happened to Medicaid, and maybe I'll get many of you to start to think differently about the process. I inherited a job that was projected to spend $5.4 trillion more money on Medicaid over the next 10 years. That would bankrupt the system. There would be no more Medicaid. $5.4 trillion is a crazy number. We currently spend about $1 trillion. So a five-fold increase, and that was what the projections were. And part of the reason for this were the legalized money laundering that many of you have dealt with of provider taxes and state-directed payments. Now, I understand hospitals want this and often need it, but the way it was done malaligned the federal government from the state government. When that happens, people start to fight. So the federal government is saying, wait a minute, what's going on? How come some states are doing so much more than other states? And I don't care where you're from, there's only 2 states that were really the varsity team on state-directed payments. Two states above and beyond everybody else, just better at it, California and New York. So if you lived in Mississippi or Alabama or New Mexico, you're paying higher federal taxes to make up for the fact that they're just smarter at using the system in those 2 states. There's some other good states too. North Carolina was good, Massachusetts was good. There are other good states, but there are just a couple that were getting a lot more money than you guys if you didn't live in those 2 states. And so we have to deal with the inequality that's created when the federal match is not honored. So the Working Families Tax Cut legislation balanced that out. It did not cut a penny from Medicaid. In fact, we're spending $200 billion more on Medicaid for the next 10 years. But what I'm about to say next is really important. When I came in, Medicare, it was growing at about 5% a year. That's more than the GDP. Medicare is growing 5% a year. Medicaid was growing at over 8% a year. Why are we paying more money for poor people than old people? Is that ethically the right thing to do? And if we're going to do it, we should do it on purpose, not because people figured out how to game the system. So what the law did was bring Medicaid to where Medicare is. They're even. We're paying more, 5% more, for both. That is a fair way of running a social safety net system in healthcare. Now, to make it work, there's one other thing we thought was important. When Medicaid was created in 1965, a beautiful landmark piece of legislation signed by Lyndon Johnson, first patient, Harry S. Truman. It had been his dream to create a system, a safety net for our nation after the Second World War. He finally got to witness it happening, was the first patient. They never envisioned working, able-bodied individuals being on the program. It never crossed their mind. Wasn't supposed to happen. And if you allow it to happen, you actually create a paradox when someone who's working and someone who's not working end up in the same place at the end of the year. It's not to take away insurance, it's to say, take the insurance if you need it. But if you're able to work, we will help you get a job or get elevated in other ways so that you can actually engage life. God puts you on the planet to change the world for the better. Go out and do it. The average person who's able-bodied on Medicaid, listen carefully, spends 6.1 hours a day watching television or hanging out. That's not what you want to do. Opiate addiction rates go up because people get bored of their lives. They're not happy. So the legislation asks states working with Medicaid to give their able-bodied individuals on Medicaid an opportunity. If you want free health insurance that you don't have to pay anything for, you got to try to work 20 hours a week. Or you can't find the job, we'll get you an education. You can go get an education. Or volunteer. Just get off the couch and engage life, and we're going to give you free health care insurance. If you came home after working a long day and your cousin's sitting on the couch in the basement watching TV all day long and doesn't want to get up and do anything, you'd probably say something to them. So what does it mean about just pointing out what everyone else is saying anyway, which is you should get up and do something? The apps that we have built, and this is Dan Brillman, our brilliant head of Medicaid, crafted these. These are wonderful private sector success stories who gave up everything to come in and serve. And Dan was able to negotiate $600 million in discounts to make it cheaper for states to get access to these programs. We've signed up the big systems. They're all out there. They work well. It's there for you to take advantage of. Please do just that. And what we're asking people to do is so straightforward that I can't imagine we wouldn't make it happen. Let me give you one last topic because I'm out of time, and we can talk about it in the Q&A. If you think about technology and the role that it will play to get us that 1 extra year of work that we are looking forward to, then you will have to acknowledge there's a possibility that technology and digitization of records and giving you your medical records so you own them, so you could kill the clipboard, get rid of the clipboard on your phone with a QR code, give anyone you want to give your medical records, including apps that are designed to interpret your medical records and help you make sense of them and take better care of yourself. We think that's a possibility. So we started funding, it's called the Access Program, technology companies to build apps so Americans can get them. We'll pay for it. They have to show outcomes benefits. You have to live longer, better, less problems with diabetes, less kidney failure, whatever it is. But if you show those benefits, we will pay you. I think this is a major theme that will benefit the American people and that the American people will like when they appreciate it. But in the meantime, we've got a little bit of a PR problem because a lot of people are scared of technology. They don't trust it. And I understand and completely share why those concerns exist. We have to get smarter on this. We have to figure out, are there ways we can talk about these issues so that we can actually get people to feel confident that they'll get a better quality experience dealing with the healthcare system if we allow technology to facilitate the process. With that in mind, we're running fast to make sure that the regulations are ready. So when you decide, both as legislators, but as people, as Americans, that AI or other tools might be worthy for you using, it'll be there for you. And if you never want to use it, that'll be fine as well. I wrote one page of thank yous down that I want to point out there because I do think there are many people in the room who have been, first of all, for the ALEC members who have been working their tails off with the goal of eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse. I've already thanked you, but we cannot succeed without you, so please keep it up. For ALEC's Government Efficiency Coalition, getting amazing results by prioritizing reducing of just the wasteful processes. We are partners to yours. Please come to us as well. We have a whole new initiative on Medicaid that we're going to talk about next week at the National Governors Association to take the 450 measures that we keep track of and reduce it to some manageable number and just focus on outcomes